Hey, 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 hey! Video 2. Okay, I got nothing. Alright, so this is the second video. Talking about the strategies for black. Excuse me now. Alright. Sipping my coffee here. So, what to do is black. Okay, well, if you watched the last video, which I hope you did, I talked a little bit about ideal strategies for both colors. And this is no different with black. You know, just to recap, you know that probably one of these two pawns is going to get played from white 90% of the time. So you need to know at least a handful of moves that are in response to these two pawns. E4 or D4. Sometimes people play E3, sometimes people play D3. Whatever, some stupid move like that. Or they'll play knight F3 or whatever. And you should certainly, obviously, if you're going to take it to the competition level, you should know more than just, but at least these two. You should have some kind of response. My response to E4, as you saw in the other game, I'm an E4 player, so I always play E4. And when I see it against me as black, I always play E5. Always. E4, E5. And then we continue in that universe of chess moves. In this case, he doesn't play E4. This guy plays D4. Queen's pawn opening. And most of the time, in computer games and in stat books, I always see F6 being the ideal reply. Almost always. So that's what I always do. Right off the top, you should have a reply for E4. So if you're playing black, if you want to just copy my routine, E4 is answered by E5. D4 is answered by knight F6. These other ones, I don't really have anything that I can remember other than generally, if you see something strange, like an unorthodox kind of opening, like knight F3, then whatever pawn you want to take, go ahead and take control of the center here, these center squares, but do it on the opposite wing. So if you see knight F3, right, don't play E5, duh, because the knight will just take back. And then you'll be down a pawn, and you can retreat the knight, and then you're a pawn to the bad, and he's a pawn to the good. So you don't want to do that. Move the pawn on the opposite wing if you want to go ahead and strike out here in the center. So if he moves knight F3 to begin with, then go ahead and play D5, and then start to develop, on the opposing wing, whichever way he's. That's not necessarily a universal strategy for all things. It's just a pointer, just something to think about while you're moving. I don't know how helpful that statement was, but whatever. Moving on. All right, so D4, knight F6, C4. I think this is. I'm not an opening expert, hardly at all. I need to study my openings a lot better than this. But this is some kind of gambit, maybe, I think. I'm not sure. Let's go back and look at that. I was hoping he was going to just take, and then I would take back with the knight, and then have central control. Right? I don't want to take at this point with the queen. You should know that moving your queen out early in the game is bad for business, for any number of reasons, because the queen can get harassed. If I had taken the queen here, she could get harassed by this knight, right? Or any number of things, a couple 3 moves down the road. Queen being right here in the center of the board is just not a good plan certainly within the first 10 moves of the game. You know, maybe later in the past the opening and in the mid game, maybe, but no, not in the opening. So I wanted to take with the knight. Oops, I'll go back. I wanted to take with the knight, hoping he was just going to go ahead and take. Instead, he chooses to develop a piece. Really, that's not. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything really bad that he's doing at this point, other than the fact that he loses a pawn and he gets 0 compensation for it. Right? What's he going to take back with? He chooses to develop, and I choose to take. Nothing there at Garden. It's a free pawn. Another developing move. That's opening the gate for the bishop for this pin. This pin is almost universally present in all openings. This is something called the 3 knight. I mean, there's 3 knights on the board, but it's a 4 knights game, something like that. There's a whole book of theory on the 4 knights game variations. I don't know it very well. I just know that that's what we're looking at here. But seems, I would say 90% of the games I play or have played, there's this opportunity to pin the knight. Now it's not an empty threat, but it's kind of a vanilla threat, because on the one hand, it's I think I mentioned this in the other video. It's kind of what I call a tripwire, in that the bishop can always take. Like on the he's threatening. He's pinning the piece. That's true, but he's also threatening taking it, which kills off any chance of using, obviously piece for piece, and then you've got, you're down material, but you perhaps neutralize a threat on that side of the board. The other thing is that what's he going to take back with this pawn, which means that he's got a pawn out of place and but he's definitely got a hole up in this side. So either way, I come out, or the opponent, whoever has this advantage, comes out somewhat ahead, because if he doesn't take, then he maintains the pin. If he does take, or if he does threaten, puts the question to the bishop, then you can always take. That's the tripwire. And then takes the knight. It's kind of a landmine. Takes out the knight, and then he puts a gap in his teeth here. So in any event, just keep that in mind. Another developing move. He wants this pawn. He'd love to get back that pawn. There's that. There's that. He gets his pawn. I get my pin. We're both happy. He's eyeballing this, but whatever. It's not going to. Unless a threat is only a threat if you come out ahead in the capturing process or in the positional posturing. If neither of those things happen, then it's not really much of a threat. You could see it and be like, "Oh, he wants the bishop," but the bishop is double protected, right, by the F pawn and by this bishop. So it's a hollow threat. I don't really care about that. I do care about getting up and sticking this little tickler up in his butt, though. Isn't that nice? Can't capture because his knight is pinned. If he castles, then I'll just go ahead and that'll be the tripwire, because I can't abide this knight being able to threaten my knight, which is in outpost position. So if he castles, which I know he's going to do here, right? If he castles, then that's my intention, is to just go ahead and take the knight. Okay, great. I'm down a bishop. He's down a knight. But my knight cannot be threatened. I've got a good knight. Good night, son. Alright, standard developing stuff. Castling. Maintain the 3 pawns in front. Don't move them. Don't move them. Don't move them. Unless you have to. queen, trying to eyeball that. Pulling back. Now this is interesting. This should be reversed, shouldn't it? It should be the bishop back here and the queen up front. But instead it's the other way around. Well, what's this going to do for him? Take? Check. Okay. It amounts to a spite check. It's a little bit more powerful than a spite check, only because of the queen. But, alright, now imagine you're me or you're any player playing black and you see this. Now you see the potential for a check here. Oh, damn. He could check me. But is it a serious threat? Is it a serious check? And all you need to devote is, I don't know, 10 seconds worth of thought to, if this is a serious check, what would happen on the next move, right? So if, pretend this pointer is the bishop. Forget the bishop's here. So take, check. Okay. Now what? Now you're black. So now what? What are you going to do? Well, there's only one move you can do, right? H8. Now what? What can you see the mouse pointer on H7? That's actually a bishop. Now what? What's the bishop going to do? He can get. He gets no action by being where he's at. He can't check you because you're on the alternative color. He can't come back at you with the other bishop because there's a pawn in the way. He can't come down there with the queen because his own bishop is in the way. So it's a meaningless check. Like I said, it's a bit more powerful than a spite check because of the queen backup, but it ultimately doesn't mean anything. All right, so that's the first puzzle, or not puzzle, step in the ladder, rung in the ladder, in the thought process. Now on to the thinking of the next move ahead. So assume that he gets his check. That's a given. He gets a check, I'll move. Now what? Right? None of this happens, by the way, until later. But I'm just pointing this out because you can see. He plays F5, knight E5, knight C7. You can see the move list right there. But it's worth pointing out that you can look at this scenario and see what could happen and know that you're safe on the next move so that you can go ahead and play a move without fear that the king is going to get checkmated. Even though he'll get checked, it'll just be a spite check. So you can go ahead and move yet another piece somewhere to get closer to tighten the noose on his side and live without fear on your side. I mean, he'll get his check and he'll get a pawn, but you need to be thinking of where you want to position your pieces now that you know that his check is going to be ineffectual. All right, so that's a long-winded way of getting. Now, I break a cardinal rule, right? See that? Why would I do that? I have one and only one reason. I want to block any counterplay he's got going on right here, and I say one and only one reason, it's a double reason, and I want to generate counterplay with this rook because I want to start attacking here. And I don't have any forces down here. They're still here in the dugout. They need to get out here. They're not here. The only guy that is here is the rook. I need to get the rook out into play, or something out into play. And the hole is still more or less plugged because the knight can't come down here. Queen will get him. The bishop can't take because if he takes, it's double protected by, it's triple protected or quadruple protected, right? Take with bishop, take back, queen. It's just not going to work out well for him to take at all. There's nothing he can do here other than likewise for him to break his own window and come down here and threaten or move the knight around or whatever. I know that's not likely going to happen because that'll give me excellent counterplay. come in here with the queen and start playing around. So he moves his knight instead. Threaten the knight. I'll just go ahead and sacrifice the knight just to get his knight out of action. And that's exactly what I do. He doesn't really, if you look at it real quick, I'm not really sure why he did that. I'm not sure what his thought process was, because if you look, there's just no safe place to put the knight other than back up in a retreating area. But even then, he's still within firing range of this knight. Why you'd stick your knight up? You shouldn't be sticking pieces up somebody's butt unless you have a very, very good reason to do so, such as in the service of a combination or a checkmate. And none of that was happening here. I think he just thought it looked like a good move, so he did it. So I moved my knight, because this knight didn't do anything anyway. And it's going to be 2-3 moves ahead, which I'll lose time trying to get this one into position somehow to coordinate with the other one. That's just, I would rather cancel out those knights and have me have the only knight left on the board than to abide this knight living up here in my underwear. I just can't stand that. So I think he's going to take, because the only other choice, of course, is to retreat. He wouldn't have done that unless he was going to do something about it. So he goes and take. Now I got stacked pawns. Oh well, it's the price I pay for getting the knight out of my ass. Again, I've read some things about how some players will just sit and marinate in angst over taking a piece because they're going to stack their pawns. Generally, you don't want to have stacked pawns because they can't guard each other, right? And they can't really coordinate with each other because they're on the same file, and you're kind of neutering your pawns that way. So you generally don't want to do that, and you don't want to take something like another pawn, which is going to give you this kind of formation. But in this case, it's really kind of the only thing I can do. And he's threatening the queen. So, in this case, I'll just go ahead and eat it. Oh well. At least, like I said, at least it gets that knight out of my underwear. And now I can move around. This, nice pin, right? Except, this is a key point here. Except, sometimes you want to, and in this case, this is all kind of, I'm not, when I'm playing this game, this is all very qualitative and to some extent anyway, and very touchy-feely about personal preference. I'm not actually sitting there, no chess player is, I don't care who you are, you're not sitting there going, oh, okay, weighing like a calculator, plugging in an equation or something. It's very, you are the advocate unto your own game. And in the moment, when you're in the bubble, as Marine Gunny Hathcock said, Gunny Sergeant Hathcock, I don't know if you know who he was, but he's a legendary Marine sniper. And he talked about when he was, laying there in the jungle waiting for Charlie, with the bugs, biting his balls and getting in his ears and shit like that, he would kind of enter this Zen state where he would put himself in what he called his bubble. And then when he got in his bubble, nothing fazed him. He could do his job. Anyway, there's a kind of similar bubble going on. You know what you want to do. You know in the moment how everything, like in the moment when I'm playing this out, I can kind of, best way to say it is I can kind of feel that this threat is meaningless, and that I'd better move my queen now while I have the chance to get her into a decent line of sight against the king, doing it now rather than later. I'm not adding that all up in pencil and paper kind of arithmetic way. It's just kind of a feeling about where to move. I guess you could call it a quantitative feeling, if that makes sense. I'm not sure what that was all about. Probably you want to get your rooks out of their cubby holes and somehow into the fight. And in this case, you would have to move the pawn, but it's better to have the rook already there and then move the pawn rather than the reverse. Have the pawn move and then move your rook, and then you risk having the rook taken. You want to already be in control of the file when the pawn gets out of the way, if the pawn gets out of the way. The rooks can always move back and forth this way, but they don't get very often an opportunity to hit the highway down here. So like I said, you want to always be in control. You want to already be in control of whatever file you think is key. And that's what he's that's what he's trying to do there. All right, moving on. Fianchetto, whatever your pronunciation preference is. That's all I'm gearing up for. I'm gearing up for this checkmate right here. Now, he's a good enough player that he sees this, right? So he plugs that hole. And remember, we're talking about being already in position when the pawn trades come. And that's what he's hoping. He not only gets to force the issue about what am I going to do with this pawn, but he also gets to plug the hole and prevent the checkmate. But this is not completely gone. I mean, there's two pawns in the way, but if for some reason I manage to get some counterplay and throw off the game and break that hole, the queen is already in position. That was the whole point behind behind moving her here, was because I remember this now, of course, after I see the game finally. I know I wanted a fianchetto here, and I wanted to take control of this diagonal. But he kind of thwarted my plan. And you say to yourself, when you're playing a game, you're like, you have a threat, and you develop a threat, and your opponent sees the threat, and he acts accordingly, or he defends accordingly. And then the frustration builds, and you say, damn it, that was my plan. That's why it's the best players in the world will always have a double purpose behind every move. I mentioned that in the other video as well. Always two things that if one option fails, you switch to plan B. You could be a three-dimensional player, I guess, and have plan C or whatever, but good luck seeing that far, and you'd be a computer if you could do that. But two objectives with the same move. Now when I say that, that's not the same thing as overworking a piece. Right? Maybe I'll do another video on that or something, but like double threats, double protect, that kind of thing. Or, excuse me, double threats and double coverage of squares, not necessarily double protection. You double protect two pieces, I guess that's fine, but you're giving that piece, like for instance, let's say this knight here. Maybe you already get this, but just bear with me. All right, so let's say the rook, instead of being here, was here, and this rook was, instead of being here, was here. Now the knight has two jobs. He's got to cover both of these guys. Or the knight potentially could cover a lot of people if you could get him under his protective cover like that. But he can only take back once. He can't take back 3 times. He can't even take back twice. Right? He can only take back once. So if the knight is overworked and he's got 2 little babies here to feed, one here and one here, then anything that threatens this knight, if you put the question to the knight, he's going to have to move if you want to keep the knight. because if you, but in both cases, whether you leave the knight and then let's say this pawn moves and threatens him, whether you leave the knight or whether you move him somewhere else, either way you've now killed off the protection for here and here. And in the worst case scenario, the knight gets taken and you're down a piece and the protection of these two is lost. Or the best case scenario in this sense is knight is threatened, knight leaves, and then now the cover is lost for those two pieces. Well, it was great. It sounded great in theory. You had one piece covering two pieces. Except all it took is a pawn push to throw that out off balance, and now your position has been flushed down the toilet because two pieces are now no longer have no cover now. So that's the idea of overloading a piece. You can overload any piece. You don't want to overload pieces by giving them two jobs to do, two defensive jobs. Two offensive jobs, on the other hand, is very powerful. That's exactly the reciprocal of double defense. Double offense is what you want. It's tough to find. It's very tough to find, especially if you're playing a decent chess player. Okay, where was I? Take. What am I thinking here? I don't remember. I think, oh yeah, so I wanted to get him out of the way, get this rook out of the way here so that I could move this rook. That was the plan. As you can see, he decided to go ahead and exercise the spite check. Remember that? We talked about that a few minutes ago. Go there. And oh, yeah, and then I'm not sure what else might have happened, but I was going to my wish list was to take back with the knight, I think. And then take. And then... Yeah, I don't remember what all my wish list was. Oh well, anyway. So he exercises the spite check. And I move. It's the only thing I can do. I could go here. There's a reason I didn't go there. I don't remember why now. Another good pin. There's just one problem with this pin. Looks juicy, looks delicious, doesn't it? But he forgot something. He forgot about the mate threat. This mate threat right here. This shit was on pause the whole time. Now it's my move, right? It's not his move, it's my move. He's threatening. He's got this nice juicy pin. But he forgot about the mate threat. And that's why, like I said, that's why it's important to lay foundation for your moves. In other words, I would not have wanted to abandon this position, this long diagonal. I would not have wanted to move the bishop back or move him up here. This does not. I mean, I can control this diagonal. That's great, but from stem to stern, this diagonal right here is the really juicy one that you really want, right? You want the long diagonal, not the shorties, not the short straws. You want the long ones. Snipers need a long range to work with. So, there it is. Release the gate, release the hounds, and now it's one move away from mate. Go ahead. Go ahead. Take that rook. You want it? Go ahead. I don't care. You can have him. I got this in the bag. No, not quite. Now, that looks perfectly reasonable. Okay. That looks perfectly reasonable. It threatens the rook. It's double threatened. The only problem is this pawn cannot act. So long as she's here, this pawn cannot go anywhere because of run and cover. This is a problem. This is a problem. But at the same time, my rook is about to be taken. Okay. So what might a person do here? Well, remember to only worry about the threats that are worth worrying about. The queen can't come down here and do anything without risk being taken. Right? She comes down here, queen takes, I mean, we trade off queens. And I suppose that he could have done that. Um, That probably would have been a better move. Well, that's kind of a move in desperation though, because it's sacking your queen. But then I guess he would have picked up a rook. Well, I can think about that later. In any event, this is better since I have the move. And here's why it's better. Because there's no way he can defend, or at least not very easily anyway. There's nothing he can defend here. If he moves this pawn, it's doesn't matter, right? It f3, queen takes f3. He's still in the same position. He's got all of his work in front of him, and the noose is now tightened because the queen controls here and here, and it's gearing up for mate. Right? There's only a handful of things he could do, and really, even go ahead, take. You want the rook? Take the rook. Right? Because I've had the queen or the rook here. Damn it, the bishop here the whole time, and I've been busting his balls here with the threats from this rook. It moves the knight, or it moves the king. Presumably, I think to get out here is his flight square. But I didn't do this yet, but you could have. Here's another counterplay. Check. Bishop goes here. Bishop a6. Check. Block. Take. Check. Block. There's good counterplay here with the bishop and with the knight being here or here, or any number of things could have happened. Check. And now the noose is pretty well tightened. It's just a matter of kicking the horse now. Not mate, but as you can see, remember before, the theme is anytime the king and the queen are lined up, like Jupiter and Saturn and Mars and, the stars have aligned, the queen is vulnerable. Nice little pin right here. Check, and it's clear to him at this point it's over. So he's like, yeah, screw it. Resign. And rightfully so. He has no counterplay. Okay, so it's worth pointing out something here. I know anytime somebody talks about their own games, it seems like they're just a fucking genius. Oh, look what I did here, and I did this, and I saw all this. And, okay. Here was the move where I was like, damn it. I mean, seriously, what I'm thinking here is shit. Shit, 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 shit. What do I do? What do I do? No, it so happened that I saw this. And I was thanking my bishop. Oh, thank you so much. You were there. You were there for me, bishop. If you hadn't have been there for me, I never would have won. And it's true, I wouldn't have. Well, maybe I would have. I don't know. But because of the foundation laid earlier by fianchettoing the bishop here and not moving him around, not sending him on fool's errands and all that, we were able to get in here and get the mate threat. So anyway, like I said, it's worth pointing out that in this scenario, I was definitely not like, you know, oh, I saw this in the contemplation. I didn't see it the prior move before because I was counting on, I think, something else over here. But I mean, this pin here is just. If I hadn't had this counterplay, this pin would have been brutal. You just see that, you know. Now what? Now I'm down a rook. What do I do? You know. But I still have this bishop. And I think my thought was, even if I lose the rook, I'll go here, and I'll waste another move and go here, and then we have a mate threat. Or it'd be mate on the next move. So, anyway, if he'd given me best play, then maybe he would have won. You know, maybe he could have gotten something down here with the queen, and I mean, this right here certainly not have been very healthy. But anyway, back to the same theme: breaking windows in your own pawn defense. Again, very, very, very deeply calculated. Needs to be deeply calculated before you break the windows in your defense. Okay, so that's it. Hope this was helpful. If not, I won't make any more. But anyway, so let me know. All right, bye.